And at Ori's trial, Ori had an alibi he could bring up, and he would get off from the murder charge of Linda Alford. And then Billy Kuenzel would then bring a civil lawsuit against the state for malicious prosecution and make a bunch of money and split the proceeds with Ori Goggins. That was the plan. It fell through. The prosecution brought Ori in to testify that this is what happened, and that's what the jury heard. Also, that you do not hear on the videos that Billy Kuenzel's defense counsel present. Then, several months later, a new defense counsel, Billy had fired a couple, he'd been through a couple of defense counsel, even complained to the bar about him, even though they did a good job for him, and even lied about some things that they were supposed to do for him, and he claims they didn't. He lied to the bar to try to get them in trouble. He has a new counsel now, and his counsel filed a motion to retry the case because they had new evidence, allegedly. The new evidence was a 15-year-old girl who said she talked to a married woman who told her, "I was sleeping with Billy the night of the murder, but I couldn't say anything because my husband would kill me." Okay, so they brought in the 15-year-old girl to testify at this trial, this hearing. They brought in the woman, the alleged woman, the married woman. By the way, the defense didn't plan on bringing in the married woman. The prosecution brought in the married woman. They got her off her job during the hearing. She came and testified and said, "I don't know Billy Kuenzel, never said that to the girl." The next day, the 15-year-old girl who said that became suicidal because she was guilt-ridden for lying. This information was presented to the prosecutor's investigator who talked to her, and they brought her in a week later to testify before the same judge that she had perjured herself, and so much for the alleged alibi that Billy was with a woman the night of the murder and at the very time of the murder. His family were the ones who got this girl to testify, and this girl was friends with certain members of his family. Billy's mother ended up pleading guilty to suborning perjury because of this incident after this hearing. So much for that alibi. And by the way, Billy still maintains in his public relations videos and in affidavits before appellate courts that he was with this woman that was completely false, proven to be false, back at the time of the murder. So he's still sticking to that tale, even today, as far as I know, last I heard. Over 20 years later, he's still sticking to that story. By the way, there have been probably about 20 courts and judges, federal and state, to hear Billy's stories about the shotgun, about the alibis, and contrary to popular belief or falsity about the court system, there's no federal or state court out there that's going to allow a person to be put to death because they missed a deadline to file a brief. That is simply untrue, even though it's been told on other cases and been told on Billy Kuenzel's case. I guess, again, it would make a great book or movie for somebody to be facing the death penalty because they missed a deadline for filing a brief by a day. That'd be suspenseful, wouldn't it? Got to get the brief in by midnight or he's going to die. But every court, federal and state, is going to hear evidence of actual innocence. That's the legal term, actual innocence, even if somebody misses a deadline. But that's what the courts have rejected. They've said, sorry, but you don't have evidence of actual innocence. Therefore, it doesn't matter that you missed a deadline. So that's why Billy Kuenzel is still facing the death penalty in spite of his claims that he missed a deadline or that he's actually innocent. It's just untrue. The other evidence the Waterston video focuses on in great detail is April Harris's testimony of corroboration of Harvey Vinn's testimony, the accomplice about Billy Kuenzel going into the store and shooting Linda Alford, the victim. It's really not the only corroboration. There's the shotgun shell, there's the wadding that was found in Linda Alford. There are other things that connect Billy Kuenzel to the murder. Not just Harvey Vinn's testimony. that needs corroboration because he was an accomplice. He drove there with Billy to steal the money. But April Harris had a friend driving her by the convenience store somewhere between 10:15 and 11 p.m. the night of the murder, and she said she saw Billy and Harvey at the convenience store. The Waterston video says that she denied that at the grand jury that indicted Billy. That's the grand jury hears prosecution evidence before the actual trial and then indicts somebody. Well, again, you're only hearing part of the story. The prosecution did have to rehabilitate April Harris at the grand jury. They were kind of surprised by what she said. But when you get down to it, and then again, this is on the other video of 2 hours and 7 minutes that I read verbatim from her grand jury testimony. It's equivocal. Equivocal testimony at the grand jury does not have to be presented to the defense counsel because it's not actual, exonerating evidence. She could tell it was Billy and Harvey, even though she was not that close, and she couldn't make out exact facial features. So that was kind of the equivocal nature of it. But she was quite confident at trial that she had seen Billy Kuenzel and Harvey Venn at the convenience store. So not quite as damaging as the Waterston video makes out. Also in the Waterston video, there's some complete baloney from a so-called expert, a medical expert, a doctor, about the accomplice Harvey Venn actually having a scuffle with Linda Offord and the shotgun going off or something. This is impossible. It's speculative at best. 20-something years later, based on him reading the autopsy report and things like that, it's completely impossible for what happened to happen based on blood spattering. It's completely impossible for this so-called expert to claim what he claims based on the blood spattering and such, with a shotgun and a scuffle. Baloney is the bottom line. And again, you can learn more about that in the longer video. Here I want to read a page from the Attorney General Luther Strange's letter in response to a letter from one of Billy Kuenzel's defense counsel. This letter was sent February 12, 2014. And one of the paragraphs in it says this, and it kind of encapsulates a lot that you need to hear and understand. Third, after the crime, Kuenzel committed acts that are completely inconsistent with any notion that he is innocent. Kuenzel was actively involved in 2 different schemes to commit fraud on the Talladega County Circuit Court by suborning perjury. Not once but twice, he and his mother first offered to pay his cellmate to fraudulently testify that he, not Kuenzel, was the one present at the murder scene. That's the Ori Goggins that I told you about. Worse, after the trial, Kuenzel and his family concocted a story that he was having sex with a married woman on the night of the murder. Kuenzel took the stand in post-trial proceedings and testified as much, and his family convinced a 15-year-old girl to testify falsely that the married woman had confessed to the affair. The 15-year-old soon recanted, explaining that Kuenzel and his family had convinced her to lie. And Judge Sullivan, the trial judge at that time, expressly found that Kuenzel had attempted to defraud the court. Unbelievably, Kuenzel, in his recently filed affidavit, still insists that his concocted sexual escapade story is true. This is the kind of stuff that happens in the public sphere where there's no judge to referee and nobody to say boo about, a defense counsel saying something that even was proven false decades before. So summing up, don't, in any case, not just this case, don't believe just after hearing one side, the prosecution or the defense, either one. That's what the procedural rules, laws, and judges are there for, that in a trial, to keep one side from having an unfair advantage over the other. And that's why you have appellate courts to review that, to make sure it was done properly. Kuenzel's case has been before many appellate courts. But without a judge present to referee, one side can tell the public just about anything to try and sway public opinion or public officials and governors, maybe to commute their sentence or to change the laws. Who knows? Don't fall for it. That jury has the best angle on everything presented in court. Seeing the look on the people's faces, hearing the inflection of the voices, and determining whether they are telling the truth or not. We don't have that benefit that they have. Alabama judges do a good job of keeping things fair and equal. Nobody wants to see innocent people executed, convicted, whatever. Billy Kuenzel has had nearly 28 years to get a court to agree with him. 12 jurors heard and saw the witnesses, and not one thought he should not be found guilty, and not one thought he should not be put to death. Even the most liberal federal judges have not considered his many high-paid lawyers' arguments worth anything toward proving his innocence. He and his own family have tried to suborn perjury more than once. He tried to get his accomplice to take the fall. Billy Kuenzel was 8 years older than the 18-year-old accomplice, Harvey Venn, tried to coach him in his original lie to the police to protect himself. Stayed very well hidden from sight as he and Harvey sat in the car waiting to rob the store the evening of the murder, and claimed he couldn't remember what he told his coworkers just after the murder when challenged at trial about that by the prosecution. He's a master manipulator, well trained to not take responsibility and throw others under the bus. Even his own mother claimed on the witness stand that the police started harassing him at 10 years old for no reason, and that's why he went wrong and had a string of petty crimes before this murder. So even his own mother didn't think he should be held responsible for things going back to when he was 10. And now Billy does not want to be held responsible for things, even murder. Now, Billy, I want to speak to you directly. You told the court 28 years ago that God would judge them for what they were doing to you. But don't you know that God will judge you? Will God forgive you if you don't confess and forsake your sin? Doesn't the scripture say that mercy comes for those who confess and forsake? How are you going to face the final judge if you refuse to confess and forsake? Are you hoping that at the last minute, maybe as you're facing the death penalty, your last few minutes, you'll be able to repent? What if you're not? What if you've hardened your heart so much by then that you're unable to repent, unable to even recognize how to confess and seek forgiveness from God? This is not something we control. God controls it. God, through Christ, provides us mercy and forgiveness and the ability to repent. We don't just gin it up on our own anytime we want after we've escaped responsibility and said, hey, I'm just going to hold out for God to forgive me at the very last minute. Is that how you think God works? I think you don't understand the God who created the universe and who judges people on a strict standard. He judged the world in the flood. He doesn't countenance sin. And he lets no one escape except by the blood of his Son, Jesus Christ. Now is the day of salvation, not later. Confess your sin now, no matter the cost. Then it's possible God, through Christ, will have mercy on you. But stubborn refusal to confess only hardens your heart against God. I believe the key for you, after all the hype that's been presented to try to get you off the hook, is public confession of your murder and your lies. And that is the only way you could find grace and mercy. Don't try to pervert the justice system. Don't try to get the laws changed to help you get away with murder. That just compounds your sin. Confess it to God now and confess it publicly. And let's end this farce, this fraud that you've perpetrated for so many years. God have mercy on your soul.